What if I were to tell you today that you could have the confidence to go toe-to-toe with anyone in a debate and come out on top? Well, that is very much possible, and I am here to tell you how. Today, I want to share with you 3 tips that can help you be successful in any argument or debate. These tips will not only give you the confidence in standing up for yourself, they will also help you to control the very conversation in every conversation while being more persuasive as well. But the last tip is the most important. The last tip will not only help you to be more convincing, but it will make your argument and you unforgettable in the long run. Well, the first tip in being more successful in a debate is to pay attention and try and take control of the discussion with questions. You see, the person asking the questions determines the conversation and the direction of the conversation and which direction that conversation is driving toward. We know this intuitively. That's why we see constantly people cutting off each other's questions and avoiding each other's questions or simply not answering them at all. Politicians are famous for doing this, and the reason we see this, the reason they try to avoid answering these questions, it's because questions place the weight of the argument upon them. You see, in debates many times it comes down to one thing: burden of proof. And whoever has the burden of proof is constantly on the defensive and constantly in a reactive state. So in order for you to be effective in your argument, you have to be able to propose your ideas proactively. That means you have to shift the burden of proof. And one way to do this, one way to control the discussion, is simply to acknowledge that the person had a good question and to redirect the question that they asked and redirect that discussion with your own question that returns the burden of proof back onto them. An example of this technique would sound something like this. Say a person starts a discussion with you about the nature of truth, and this person goes on to ask you what gives you the right to think there is an absolute truth. A quick and effective way to flip the burden of proof would be to respond, "Well, that's a great question. Would you say that it's absolutely true that all truth is relative?" Well, in this scenario, you would have done 2 things. First, you would have gained control of the debate. Secondly, you would have immediately put this person on the defensive to try and build a conclusion that contradicts their own premise. How can a person make any meaningful absolute claim on the nature of truth if all truth is relative? The second tip in being successful is to make the other person define their terms clearly. You see, every position can be broken down essentially into 3 levels. Level 1. The most basic is words or concepts. Now that seems like common sense, and it is, but I would submit to you today that common sense is a superpower right now. And not many people think about the meaning that their words carry or the concepts behind their words. They might not think about the idea that what they say is not what you hear. The concepts that they say may not be the concepts you hear. So that's an important level. The second level of any position are the statements in that position. Those statements are also known as propositions or premises. And these statements are basically just declarations that need to be true in order for the argument to be valid and the conclusion to be true. The third level of the argument or the position is the overall structure of the argument itself, built on these statements or premises. And one of the quickest ways to control and drive a debate into your favor is to get to the most basic building blocks of the other person's argument, and that's the concepts behind their words. And then immediately redefine those concepts in relation to each other and to other ideas, or you can simply ask them to clarify their position, starting with the individual words and ideas that they use. A famous example of this was when Ravi Zacharias was once questioned in a public forum, "If there is a God, why then is there so much evil in the world?" And he immediately responded, "When you say there's too much evil in the world, you're assuming that there's good. When you assume that there's good, you assume there's a such thing as a moral law on which there's a basis to distinguish between good and evil. But if you assume a moral law, you must posit a moral lawgiver, but that's who you're trying to disprove. Because if there's no moral lawgiver, there's no moral law. If there's no moral law, there's no good. But if there's no good, there's no evil. So what was your question again? Now that's a very advanced response, I admit. But right here, he implements tips 1 and 2 together to completely flip the argument back on the one asking the question. First, he redefines the concept of evil as something that requires an opposing concept called good to exist, and then goes further to state another premise required for both concepts to exist together. Once he clarifies the concept of evil, he uses that to force the person's argument into a corner and turns around and takes control of the conversation by using tip 1, asking the question, "What were you asking again?" Now, you may disagree with his premises, sure, but his use of controlling the debate with the clarification of concepts and posing a responding question was masterful. Now, the third and final tip, the most important tip to being successful in any argument, to being persuasive in any debate, is to end with a question. Now, you're probably thinking, what? What do you mean end with a question? I thought the whole idea of an argument was to get the other person to acknowledge your conclusion was true. Well, yeah, but not really. You see, the real secret to persuasion is that we don't ever really truly persuade anyone of anything right there on the spot. We all ultimately have to be persuaded within ourselves, and that usually takes time to come to fruition. And using closing questions can be one of the best long-term convincing tools at your disposal. A great closing question is like planting a seed in the other person's mind, or a stone in their shoe, creating an idea that they may not be able to shake anytime soon. And the longer that question remains, the more likely that person will begin to privately entertain that question internally. And it can't be stated enough. Arguments are never really won. They're planted, and people have to arrive at ideas on their own, at their own pace, and in their own time. As an example, I used this closing question technique years ago when I met Daniel Dennett at a debate in New Orleans over Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene, and newly released book at the time, The God Delusion. In this debate, Dennett's entire stance was to propose the idea that belief in God was nothing more than a meme, an idea that adapted to survive and therefore should not be worthy of consideration as a worldview. I was allowed to ask the final question of the debate from the floor, so I simply asked him one question. Was the idea he just presented just a meme, adapting to survive? Was that noteworthy of consideration for a worldview? Or was his idea somehow different? And if so, was his idea different from any other idea? How did what he say differ from an idea? I said it with a smile, and he smiled back, stumbling through the answer, but we both knew that that one question was the one question he didn't want to hear. But that example is meant to show you the power of a closing question. It can carry with it a final assault on an argument that cannot be easily dismissed or forgotten, forming the foundation of a future change and a mindset for the other person. If I had to summarize this in one final sentence, it would be this: statements and arguments are often forgotten, but great questions can live forever. With that said, it's time to come to a close. If you like this content, feel free to like or comment below. Please feel free to subscribe. I look forward to having many, many more discussions about faith and different worldviews and how to debate and biblical exposition. And if you want to be a part of that, you're more than welcome. Thank you.